Thank you, Janet. Hi, everybody. Well, where can I put my water? I'm delighted and surprised to be on this panel, which addresses, I think, a really significant range of topics about the unfolding shifts in global political power. A word in my defense, I was only asked onto this panel by Pascal. Where's Pascal? Whoa, you owe me one. And I only agreed to speak because my own work on US-Iran relations had led me toward issues around soft power, soft war, and cyber warfare that I was keen to explore. Clearly, the Chinese curse is upon us and me. We do live in interesting times. This is not a paper. It can only be a provocation. And I've called it the cyber military industrial complex, international relations through a new prism. I'm going to try and argue we are already involved in a new and perhaps still emerging phase of global relations that could be described as cyber warfare. A new cyber military industrial complex is emerging with the US and the UK among the main promoters of this process, and that we indeed are in many crises, that our language, our conceptual frameworks, and legal instruments are in crisis. The academy is in crisis trying to deal with these issues, and indeed our democracies are in crisis as we learn the extent of the internal surveillance, the budgets afforded this complex at a time of deep and complex austerity. So if I'm representing any region at all, which I don't wish to, or where my focus is, it's actually back to the West. Some brief stories to make sense of what I'm trying to think about. And this really is, I was thinking plenaries in IAMCR are the places where the peer review happens after the paper. So that's quite nice. You know? So, you know, some real world story. In May 23rd this year, President Obama, at a speech at the National Defense University, said that the US must define our effort not as a boundless global war on terror, indicating, as many people suggested, that that global war on terror was over. The costs have been estimated, the costs of wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan are estimated at least 330 direct war cost lives and up to $4 trillion in US spending. And I'm clearly going to edit as I go because I'm mindful of time. The very good cost of war project at Brown University itemizes all of this. Adjusting for inflation, the outlays for these conflicts around the world make the war on terror second only to the costs of World War II. And of course, there are other wars still going on. But peace has not broken out. Already in 1993, in a landmark RAND report, John Aquila argued cyber war is coming. In 2005, the US Air Force boasted it would now fly, fight, and win in cyberspace, which was now articulated as the fifth domain of warfare. In May 2009, the US created a military cyber command. There's much, much more to talk about. And indeed, the US political elite has announced that cyber warfare has taken over from the war on terror as the principal enemy potential. In June 2012, a report in the New York Times confirmed what many already had suspected, that Stuxnet, a particularly vicious internet worm that affected Iranian nuclear centrifuges in Natanz, had been a joint US-Israeli operation. I can say a lot on Stuxnet, and my joy for this day is I have another paper in half an hour in political economy where I'm focusing much more on US-Iran relations. The US and Israel have collaborated in the development of not one but three viruses, which are eloquently named Stuxnet, Flame, and Duku, which have been used against the Islamic Republic of Iran. These viruses have been examined by many, many computer scientists and have been voted amongst the 10 most destructive computer viruses, amongst the 5 worst computer viruses. The revelations about these viruses were particularly contained in David Sanger's book, Confront and Conceal. the never-before-told story of what was called Olympic Games, the code name for a major US covert operation against Iran, which was launched by the Bush administration with Israel's cooperation in 2007, but has been vastly expanded under President Barack Obama. The importance of Stuxnet, Michael Hayden, a former director of the USA, has said, previous cyber attacks had effects limited to other computers. This is the first attack of a major nature in which a cyber attack was used to effect physical destruction rather than just slow down another computer. And Hayden has called it, someone has crossed the Rubicon, likening the cyber sabotage of Iran's plants in some sense to the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. This is a pivotal moment, the genie is truly out of the bottle. Excuse me a minute. So although in various calculations and much of the rhetoric, particularly from the West and particularly from the United States, has been around China's cyber attacks and lots of systematizations of that, as this particular slide shows, actually makes China's attacks on the US, it's in terms of numbers, the largest number of attacks. Many, many analysts in IR and in computer science actually agree that Stuxnet has been far more problematic. So we have, I think, an emerging language of cyber warfare, and we have linguistic problems. There's a whole new taxonomy of cyber terms. I won't go through them. Are they assaults? Are they manipulations? Et cetera, et cetera. How do we label hostile and malicious action in cyberspace, which become conflated under this single term, cyber war, and of course includes many different kinds of things: crime, espionage, protest, activism. The root metaphor still suggests other kind of war metaphors: attack, offense, defense, battlefields, domains of war are all part of the entitlement of the war metaphor. So the war on terrorism may well be over, yet it is metamorphosized in many ways into this notion and this powerful domain of cyber warfare. Analysts are arguing the toss. Richard Clarke from within the US defense establishment has said on the left, cyber warfare will not take place, arguing in a sense it's like nuclear deterrence. It's a mad idea. If one really goes beyond the boundaries of the current moment, the response from others would be mutually assured destruction. Others are saying, no, cyber warfare and we're wired for war. This is actually on the way. So I was thinking about US-Iran relations, and then, of course, in this last 3 weeks, PRISM has happened. If you've been involved with political action in Turkey or in Brazil, or shout out to all of those, and don't know what's been happening, a brief description. Edward Snowden, who you see on the left, leaked material to The Guardian and The Washington Post, an interesting invocation of the power of the press still to publicize powerful international issues, claiming that data from internet companies is only the tip of a much bigger digital surveillance program that includes NASA tapping directly into the global internet backbone to obtain raw traffic data. And many whistleblowers, including Daniel Ellsberg and, of course, Julian Assange, have applauded Snowden's brave activity. As far as I know, he's still locked in a transit lounge in Moscow airport. That's my last information, and we're still waiting to see where he goes. Ecuador is suggested as his safe haven. In many ways, what has been revealed are at least four independent programs, bulk collection of telephone records, this particular PRISM program, Obama's increasing implementation of an aggressive foreign and domestic cyber operations policy, and false claims by NSA to Congress. These are some of the slides that the PRISM revelations are centered on. I'll go through these very quickly. I'm kind of amused, and you might also have bumped into this, that many contemporary computer graphic designers have said, actually, what's terrible about this is not what it reveals, but the fact that the NSA can't actually afford better graphic designers. And there are some very nice revisions of this on YouTube. I don't have time to play them. Some of the things we know in the leaked documents, the NSA and the PRISM program, and I keep wanting to say prison, but it's PRISM, obtained direct access to user data from 7 online ICT companies: AOL, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Paltalk, Skype that we've used, and Yahoo. This shows it. The NSA's director has confirmed the existence of PRISM. And NSA communications are collected and viewed on a daily basis. Glenn Greenwald, reporting for The Guardian, has made the important point that one of the most, that's, again, I'm just trying to edit my text, that Obama has continued the Bush war on terror and the national security state actually in the dark, and that the worldwide surveillance apparatus that the NSA is constructing has actually grown under Obama. The other importance of this whole, these revelations is that the directives contemplate the possible use of cyber actions inside the United States, although it specifies that no such domestic operations can be conducted without the prior order of the president, except in cases of emergency. The aim of these documents was to put in place tools and a framework to enable governments to make decisions on cyber action. Lest you think I'm engaging in American bashing, this is, of course, not just an American process. We now have the UK and the famous Five Eyes. It sounds like a plot out of Enid Blyton, where Britain's spy agency, GCHQ, the government communications headquarters, has secretly gained access to the network of cable, the very network of cables which carry the world's phone calls and internet traffic, and has started to process vast streams of sensitive personal information which it shares with its American partner, the NSA. The sheer scale of the agency's ambition is reflected in the titles of its two principal components: mastering the internet, would that academe could master the internet, and global telecoms exploitation, scooping up as much online and telephone traffic as possible. This is all being carried out without any form of public acknowledgement or parliamentary debate. One thing GHQ is able to do is it taps into and stores huge volumes of data drawn from these fiber optic cables for up to 30 days. So this can be sifted and analyzed. That operation is codenamed Tempora. I keep wanting to name it Tempura because I think it would be batter, and that's a joke. Yeah, sorry. So many people are arguing that actually, in this particular moment, GCHQ might actually trump NASA as an intelligence superpower. What are we to think about this? And this is where I come to my provocations. There are lots and lots of elements worthy of examination. These include, and I will really have to race through this, there are many, many issues of law and regulation. NATO has already drawn up under what is known as the Tallinn Manifesto, the Tallinn Code, when or how to think about acts as acts of warfare. And of course, the big question is, if one party in NATO were attacked, would the rest of NATO actually come together and act together to deal with this attack? So there are many issues of judicial due process, of oversight. There are arguments, of course, that pit our security in Western democracies, particularly here in the US and in the UK, that pit security against privacy. There are arguments about content versus metadata, and we increasingly have analyses that suggest that if you get even the simplest metadata of a person's activities on their telephone and on the internet, you can construct a fairly coherent narrative of their lives. So there's a huge potential for internal snooping via this collection of metadata. And indeed, if the argument is that we are looking for needles in a cyber information haystack, I'm not sure that that makes me feel any more secure, because we know that both the people involved in the Boston bombing and the people involved in the Woolwich machete attack were already on the radar of the security agencies. So if we have more and more information, it may well be a myth that we should feel more and more secure. There are challenges to older definitions of war. There is the kind of hypocrisy of soft power arguments that point outside the West and that don't take Western activity seriously. And it seems to me if you read Nye, who gives us this term, his argument is absolutely that hard and soft power have to work together to make smart power. Otherwise, neither are very intelligent. I think for me there are three main arguments, and I'll pull them together as I try and conclude. I think one of the most worrying aspects of this sudden set of revelations, although it ties to some of the implications on the war and terror that were already unfolding, is that, so my first point is, it's bringing the war home. It speaks to the more abstract issue of changing the boundaries of the inside and the outside, changing the boundaries of enemies outside the national boundary and enemies within. Currently on British television, there's the much applauded television series The Americans, set in the 1980s, which centers on a KGB Russian spy couple who live like ordinary Americans in suburban DC. This idea of the fifth column, the enemy within, has been in popular imagination for a long time. What these revelations from the about the NSA and GCHQ have the potential to do is to focus even more on the enemies within. And in Britain, we're having more and more revelations about the MOD and police going undercover, having relationships with women as they try and infiltrate the environmental movement, indeed spying on the Stephen Lawrence family to try and find some dirt on the family. So our fears about external threat are now being added to by fears of internal threat. And I think that has powerful implications for a sense of trust and belonging and inclusion in a democratic polity. The second point, which is, of course, my title. I've got stuck with my slides. This has collected all. Sorry, that was just another, one of the other issues is who are the actors here? Are they states or are they social movements, hacktivists, anonymous, lulsec, etc.? But I'm cutting that. My second point, and Janet, I'm mindful of time, is, and it's interesting how discourse develops. We suddenly have a moment where the evolving military-industrial complex, a term coined by Eisenhower in the 50s to try and understand the US emerging as a nuclear power and the various corporate elements involved in the production of nuclear power and nuclear weapons, that many, many people suddenly, so this is a sort of a piece of discourse emerging, are talking about, Dadarian did a little while ago, he talked about the industrial media entertainment network, Christopher Booker has a short film called The Expanding Cyber-Industrial Complex. Pratip Chatterjee talks about the National Security Industrial Complex, and Ron Diebert and Rafael Rogozinski, in a paper in 2011, wrote about the new cyber-military industrial complex. I did Google it. You'll have to believe me. I did come up with the term. And of course, you find that other people are thinking in the same way. It is an irresistible market opportunity. There is a new cyber-military industrial complex that has exploded, estimated to be between $80 billion and $150 billion annually. I've got lots of information about the NSA and its subcontractors. Booz Allen, the corporation that Edward Snowden, who is the whistleblower, was working for, is one of these four firms. According to financial data, it had 24,000 employees in 2012, and its profits increased to 84 million in 2011 and 230 million in 2013. Surveillance is big business, both for online companies and those conducting the online spying for intelligence agencies. Chatterjee, these are some other, this is the idea of the revolving door of the corporate sector and the national security sector working together, taking money, personnel moving, and the revolving door. Booz Allen, Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense. And I suppose my third point, and I end here, is the challenge this poses for us living in democracies and indeed for academe. So I think there are a number of crises happening. There's a crisis of trust. There's a crisis of trust in the governments of adequate supervision of such decision-making, not only at a public level, but actually at a parliamentary level. Do our elected representatives even know what is happening behind the scenes? There is potentially a crisis of trust internally being manifest in national populations. The rise of the EDL in Britain, Islamophobia, are shorthands for these kinds of problems. There's an economic crisis, potentially, given the money involved in the cyber-military industrial complex versus austerity and all its manifestations, unemployment, precariat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, in all of this, information is key. In media studies, we've been arguing for a long time. Western cultures are scopophilic. We love the image. We love to see. What is so interesting about information is, of course, not only is it invisible, it is unseeable. So we need to shift our focus of attention to how do we conceptualize that which cannot be seen. And we've already had the puncturing of cyber utopianism from Morozov, inviting us to think about the Chinese state, the Islamic Republic, North Korea. It's time now that we take our, the dynamics happening in our own Western democracies seriously. I think it's a very powerful crisis. Thank you for listening.